Thursday, February 2nd, 2023 Emergency Public Clemency Board meeting. This meeting was set to cover the agenda items that were set for our January 20th meeting that was canceled. The first hour of the meeting will be open to the public, and there will be no closed meeting for this week. In addition to this meeting does not replace our February board meeting that is set for Friday, February 17th, 2023. That meeting will also begin at 10:30 with the first hour open to the public and the second hour closed. And as mentioned, our board chair, Patrick Canavan, is unavailable today, so I'll be acting as chair. But before we begin our meeting today, I just wanted to do some quick housekeeping items. If you aren't speaking, if you could please mute your phone, that would be great. And if you have any questions, if you could hold them to the end, there's going to be a period where we have questions and answers, and you'll be able to ask your questions during that time. And also, if you feel comfortable, feel free to use the chat function as well, and we'll be happy to address any questions during that portion of the meeting. So I would like to take official attendance of our board members to just to reconfirm that we have quorum, and I will call the names of each board member. And if you could just say here, that would be great. And my apologies in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. So we know Patrick is unavailable. Felisa Carter. Here. Awesome. Brian Ferguson. Emily Gunston. Okay, and Indira Hennard, I am here. Michael Porcello.
Here.
Thank you. Kata Semyonova. Pardon me if I mispronounced that.
I'm here. Katya Semyonova.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Elena Suttenberg.
Hi, good to see you. It's Ilana.
Oh, Ilana. Thank you so much, Ilana.
Thanks.
Awesome. And so we need 5 members to reach quorum, and I believe we have that, so we can proceed. So thank you all. Moving right along to new business, I want to have a motion to add a new agenda item to the meeting. We would like to make a motion to discuss the transition of Sonia Weil from the Clemency Board. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. As our, excuse me, as our staff director mentioned via email, the end of the council period also brings about some changes for our board. And so after 6 years of chairing the Judiciary Committee, Councilmember Allen was assigned to a different committee. And because Sonia works for Councilmember Allen, she was also reassigned. And so she's no longer a member of the Clemency Board. And Councilmember Pinto is a new Judiciary Chair, and Michael Porcello from her office has been assigned to the board. So welcome, Mike. We're so excited to work with you, and welcome to the board. And then moving right along, and if there's no questions or thoughts on that, we can move right along. Want to provide just a brief update on the combined release forms. At our last board meeting, we discussed making changes to our combined release of information form to include the request of juvenile or otherwise sealed records, as well as an extension of the expiration date for CSOSA releases. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to our former staff director, Parisha Dixon, to provide the board with an update on this matter. Thank you, Parisha.
Thanks, Indira. And actually, the current staff director, former staff director, is Christina. I don't think she's here with us today, so I'll go ahead and take that over. So as you all recall, we were seeking at some point earlier to try to change the 30-day expiration that we had on the release of information form and extend it to 1 year. And this was really important because it takes a long time to get records, just candidly. And by the time, particularly for our incarcerated persons who, mail has to get through lots of different barriers, that communication, getting back to us could take longer than 30 days, in and of itself. And so our goal was to extend it to 1 year for CSOSA to match that of MPD and the courts, and we actually did that. So we did get that extended. It's been officially updated on our release of information form. In addition to that, we were seeking to also have access to justice. We were also seeking to have some sort of release form to get access to juvenile records and other sealed records, in the case that we need it, right? That won't apply to all of the applicants, but in the case that it does, we want to be able to see those records, with our overall goal of having all of the documents that the pardon attorney would otherwise have in making the determination on the federal level. So we were actually able to do all of those things too. Chief Judge Josie Herring has actually authorized us to have access to justice. I actually started that training myself yesterday. It's 2-part training. A few of you may actually need to get trained too. This came up yesterday. Given the sensitive information that's can be accessed in justice, that information technically shouldn't be shared, but for between the board, but ensuring that the board, those who are not assigned or working for any law enforcement adjacent agencies, those persons may have to go through a background check to also have access to the sensitive records and the communications that you all will have to have within the board. So just putting that out there, particularly Indira, Brian, Felisa, I believe you three may be the three, as the other board members have that access through their agencies. But again, to be continued. I'm still trying to figure that part out with the CJCC. So I'll update you as I get an update. But we do otherwise have a process in place, at least for the juvenile records, or accessing juvenile records and that of sealed records. I've sent you all last month copies of those forms, the release forms for the new release of information, our combined one, as well as the juvenile and sealed records. Hopefully they're okay. I didn't hear any feedback from the board, but we have been reviewing and having many conversations back and forth with general counsel, and I think that they are sufficient, and we wanted to get them uploaded as soon as possible. So I have already submitted those to be uploaded to our website, in addition to some small changes to the application that I've sent to you all, so that we can have the most updated information on our website before our event. And so we'll talk about the event a little later, but what we don't want is sort of what's happening now, right? For an applicant to go online, fill out an application, not have the most updated, releases. Now we have to track them down to get the updated releases. It halts the process for the applicant. It halts the process for us. And so I wanted to get that uploaded as soon as possible, and that's what we did. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about that?
What would the timeline for their training be? I'm happy to do it. I was just curious about the time commitment and when that would be necessary.
For justice?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would actually be your trainer, and the training would be, I think there's 30 minutes for 2 parts, so about an hour. It's not a long training at all. It's more so the bigger concern would be getting the background check. You'd have to get that yourself. But again, what I'm doing, what I'm trying to argue or trying to sort of sort out is, we have an MOU with CJCC, in that, it's to be understood that we are the whole reason for me pulling the records is so that the board can deliberate over them, and the board will need to have access to them to deliberate over them. And so the understanding is that the board, needs that. And if we can get that, what's the word? If we can be on the same page and have an MOU, understanding that what happens in the board sort of stays in the board, I think you'll still have to be able, do your background check. But aside from that, hopefully the MOU can capture everyone, the entire board, not just those that are law enforcement adjacent. But again, that's not up to me. it's up to CACC, but we do have an MOU, and so if we can do, so we are in communication with General Counsel to sort that out. So I'll update you guys as I get updated.
I have a question about the sealed records, and I know this is something I've mentioned a few times before. Obviously, the defendant can consent to their records being released, but the government would also have to consent if it was kind of sealed at either a joint request or sealed at the request of the government. Have we discussed with Superior Court kind of how that would work? Because I understand that they might agree to the release, but that the government might or might not, kind of depending on the circumstances, also agree to the release. And I think that we would need to kind of think through. It could be grand jury material or kind of other things that the government might have an interest in keeping sealed.
And you're talking specifically for sealed records, right?
Sealed records. I defer to OAG on the juvenile records. That's not typically USAO, so I really defer to OAG typically on that. But just in terms of sealed records, the defendant can certainly consent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be appropriate for the court to release them.
Okay, well, we can continue having that conversation. The form has been created. I've sent it out and asked for feedback at like last month. I'm planning to have another meeting with the Superior Court General Counsel because we were developing an MOU for the Clemency Board and that council. I welcome you to attend the meeting. It's my understanding that the actual juvenile court, the sealed and juvenile record sort of process is still being built. The form is step one, but what happens sort of after that is still being built. And so that's why we are continuing to have those conversations. I welcome you to join it. And then we can bring back any issues and concerns to the board for a joint discussion.
Sure, I'm happy to join those meetings. My question, so it's not really a question of the form because the defendant, it's a form for the defendant, right? So they can't have the government consent in the form. It's just their consent, which is appropriate, right? But that's kind of separate from the government's consent. I know this is kind of something we've discussed before in a lot of different contexts. And I'm happy to kind of continue to be part of it. The form is really just the defendant, though. It's not necessarily an authorization for the court to release them. It's the defendant's authorization for that they give their consent. Does that make sense? There's kind of
I understand. I understand your question. I'm
happy to continue to talk about it, though. I'm happy to be part of any meetings or anything.
Okay, we can continue the conversation. Does any other board member have any input for that? Okay. And perhaps it's us having conversations with your agencies, with DOJ, and discussions. The idea for the board, right? As a board member, the idea for the board is to want to have access to the records to get a full picture of the applicant, to be able to make the evaluation determination in the same way that it's made on the federal level. So as I said, we can continue to have conversations, but that's our goal and that's our hope. So hopefully the agency, if necessary, we can maybe have discussions with your agency and potentially have some sort of understanding or MOU there as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. And I think it would be good to, I don't know if Emily has kind of been involved in this discrete issue in terms of the juvenile records. I'm just not sure one way or the other. But I think it might be helpful to loop them in, into that conversation as well, both as to juvenile and as to sealed records that might not be juvenile.
Okay.
May I interject? Just have a couple of follow-up questions, Ilana. This is Christina, by the way. Hi there. I just wanted to ask, with respect to the access to juvenile and field records, if the consent is coming from the applicant, who the applicant will already have access to that information, and that's what the process that's been built out with the courts is for, is that the applicant who normally will already have access to their own information is essentially saying the information that I have access to, that I personally have a right to, I am giving that information for the board to utilize in my review of my Clemency Board application. So where does the government come into play with this? Is that even necessary for us to get consent from the government if an applicant already has access to that information by giving their consent to the board?
Sure. So there's kind of a few different ways records might become sealed, and Kaya, feel free to jump in anytime. But it could be sealed at the request of the defendant. For example, the defense, let's say at a trial, they have kind of information that they just want to discuss with the judge that they don't want the government to be aware of, right? And the defense might kind of ask for discussions about that witness or something to be sealed. Similarly, the government might have a discussion about either grand jury material or kind of protected information that, or maybe related to a different investigation that is not part of the charging document or something like that. And so the government might ask for that information to be sealed. There's some times where both parties might ask for something to be sealed. It might deal with sensitive medical or mental health records, or kind of various things where both parties might have an interest in it being sealed. So there's kind of different ways that things can be sealed, but then also once it's sealed, it's really the court ordering the sealing. And so the court also kind of would be the one who would have to allow the unordering of allow the unsealing. So there's kind of a bunch of different ways it could be sealed. And I understand that the defendant can allow the clemency board to access things to which they have access, but the defendant doesn't have access to everything. Likewise, the government might not have access to everything that the defendant has. So there's kind of a lot of different permutations. And Katja, let me know if you think I'm mischaracterizing or missing anything.
I think we can also take it as a case-by-case basis. Sealed records, I don't know that we ever need to see grand jury deliberations, right? Like when we're talking about sealed records, talking about, like you mentioned, mental health records, some sort of mitigating information that can tell a full story of a case for an applicant or of them as a person, right? Like when I think of sealed records, I'm thinking of those records versus something that the government might be more protective of, for example, grand jury deliberations. And so I think generally sealed records and juvenile records, this is all case by case. We just want to have a process in place. And as I said, it's still being built out, but we want to have a process in place where we have the ability to potentially access it. I mean, again, to tell this story and to have this to tell the story and make this determination with a full picture and the full picture that the pardon attorney would have in making that determination on her end. That's our goal. So we can continue talking about it. Great question. Thank you, Christina. We can continue talking about it, but I think generally it will be a case by case basis generally anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I was just kind of curious about the procedure for kind of how we would do it on a case by case basis. I agree that it often would be kind of determined based on that individual set of circumstances. And grand jury might not have been the best example. Sometimes even part of a compassionate release motion might be filed under seal or something when it involves really sensitive information. And but yes, we can continue to discuss it.
I think I would just add that if it is the government that is objecting to the release of some information, then it generally wouldn't have to do with the applicant. It would have to do with like a witness in the case. And then maybe there should be a process by which the clemency board decides that it doesn't need that information in order to move forward with the applicant's process. Because I don't imagine that the government would be objecting to things about the applicant being unsealed.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that having kind of a situation where you could bypass that sealed information would make a lot of sense. I agree.
That's helpful. And as we continue conversation with General Counsel, I think it might be helpful to maybe pull both of you guys in to give input on how the process should be layered, essentially. Any other feedback or input on the record requests? What about the changes to the website? Any questions about that? They're very minor. They're non-substantive. Two of the four changes just have to do with just letting the applicant know that there are other additional forms, this juvenile and sealed record form. One is just a technical change, which is the date of the update. And the other change is simply asking sort of how did they hear about us? You'll hear later, but we've been doing a lot of outreach on our end and just sort of wanting, knowing where our outreach efforts are sort of making some leeway. It's just helpful. If no other input, I'll turn it back over to Indira.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, wanted to go to the next item on our agenda, and we wanted to provide an update on the Clemency community event. And our first community event is in less than a week, and our staff director has been working very hard behind the scenes to get everything in order. We're so excited for it. As you know, our purpose of this event is for the district's clemency board, its application process and relief potentially available to incarcerated persons and returning citizens through clemency and other administrative remedies. And so the community event is called the Clemency and Other Remedies Options for Incarcerated Persons and Returning Citizens, and returning citizens. And so it's scheduled for February 8th, 2023 from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And again, this will be our first of 4 events of its kind throughout the district. We're going to hold them in each quadrant. We will begin in Northeast with the first being held at the Dorothy I. Height Library, which is located at 3935 Benning Road Northeast in Washington, D.C. 20019. The finalized agenda and promotion materials have been sent to everyone. And so please, please, please promote the event throughout your networks. We truly need all hands on deck to ensure this event is a success. The agenda still includes the same speakers: Lamont Carey from the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizen Affairs, President Obama's Clemency Grant recipient Norman Brown, the U.S. Pardon Attorney Ms. Liz Oyer, excuse me if I mispronounced that wrong, Public Defender's Service Community Defenders Division, and of course, our board, the District Clemency Board. And so I want to give a special shout out to Emily for volunteering to present on behalf of the board. Thank you so much, Emily. And at this time, I'll turn it over to the staff director to provide us with additional community event updates.
Thank you, Indira. So as she just mentioned, you all should have received the flyers in many different forms, as well as the finalized agenda. Has anyone not received that? Okay. Please, please, please circulate these through your networks, social media, friends, family, friends of family, any and everyone, if you can. We really, really need all hands on deck in order to make this event successful. I sent out and I asked last month for you all to let me know of any nonprofits or organizations that you believe could benefit from the information, or even knowing of the Clemency Board generally and the work that you all are doing. And I didn't hear anything back from you all. So I have on my end have been promoting through the agencies that we already have connections with. We've been building more and more new connections, but we welcome any more, right? Like if you all have any others, or if you have already been promoting, that's great. Let me know those agencies so that I can add them to our list for continuing to sort of promote not just this event, but other events. Our promotion material came out a little later than I expected. So the time is short. So please, 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 I cannot say it enough. We really need all hands on deck for promotion.
If I can just add something to that, I'm not sure if, and apologies for not submitting this earlier, but if you all have reached out to the RANS, or the Reentry Action Network, which is a collaboration of reentry-based nonprofit organizations and community organizations in the city. And they have, I think, quarterly, but maybe monthly, at the very least quarterly meetings to coordinate their kind of like efforts with respect to the agenda vis-a-vis reentry in the city. But they are like on the ground and in contact with a very wide and deep array of returning citizens and people who might be eligible or interested in clemency, or at least knowing more about it. And they're coordinated and they're organized, so reaching out to them would touch a lot of people in a very short order.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I don't have a personal connection with Rand. If you can send me one, that would be awesome. But I do have one of our speakers, Keisha Robinson, I believe, is
she's
somewhere
on
very high up. in red.
Yeah, she's on. Yeah,
On
absolutely.
the board somewhere. So when I met with her last week, she told me that she would be sure to blast the event invitation to RAN, who
Okay.
has access to many other organizations or reentry-based organizations. But if you also have a contact with RAN, that's great too. I think as many contacts as we can will be helpful. And I'll follow up with Keisha to see if she got that out. If not, then I'm happy to do it myself. But that's also been very beneficial, and it's a good point to make, is that there are a lot of agencies who have access to other agencies who have access to other agencies, and so those are very helpful. I'm learning about them too. So if you all have them in your mind or head of those, maybe not a direct agency that can benefit, but of note that works with other agencies that sort of work in the reentry space that have clients or connections that can benefit, let me know, because that's how a lot of the outreach has been happening through other agencies. Any others that, if you think of any, please let me know. There's so many in DC. There's no way I've reached them all. But we've been having some really great support in the community who have, like I said, connections. And so they have been willing to sort of blast through their connections. And it's my understanding it's reached a number of people already. So that's great. Okay. So day of, we have, obviously it's like less than a week at this point. The logistics day of is what I've been sorting through now, technical, like technically sort of what the setup is, the setup of the room and things. And so I went to the library yesterday. I'm going to go back again today. But just to give you a little bit of sort of what my idea is, and please give me any input. Day of, OGC has so graciously said that they will sort of handle a lot of the day of assistance and support that will be needed. For example, like coming to set up, right, helping community members from the door into the room. The room is like, it's not just right by the door, right? It's like kind of like down the stairs and around it. So sort of directing people. We plan to have a few tables set up, one with our Clemency board's pamphlets and information on it, one with a sign-in sheet. Our hope is to, for the community members who do show up, to have their contact information for future events so that we can continue to keep in touch and promote that way. We're going to have cameras, or a camera, to record the presentations. Our hope is that the camera they said that this is fine. The camera will focus just on the presenter and not the audience, and will not be recording any question and answer session. But the goal is to be able to provide this information to more people via our website. So if we can post some of these presentations on our website, that would be very helpful. A very helpful outreach sort of tool, but also a very informative sort of tool for the public. Going forward, I think we should think about, for these events, particularly since we're having 3 more of them, having an option for Zoom, right? For those who cannot leave their home or have other obligations but can tune in, or a YouTube stream or something like that. Also making our event, well, we're going to have an interpreter there, as sign language interpreter present, but making it more ASL friendly, sort of online on our website, right? Like having maybe the presentations interpreted in a way that they can click the link and go to it, right? So these are ideas that have come up over my meetings. I think we should definitely consider them going forward. But before the 8th, we will be able to record. We'll have the sign language interpreter there. My idea is to have a table where the speakers are sitting sort of panel style in the front. In the case that, for questions, right, there might be sort of one speaker that can respond to a question, another responds to a question, so that they're facing the audience and not sort of back facing the audience. that's sort of what I'm thinking logistically. Every speaker will have about 20 minutes to speak, no more than that. Everyone has confirmed. Everyone's really excited to present. And so, yeah, I think we're all set up for that for the day of. Any questions about that or input, feedback? Is anyone not able to come to the event? Any of the board members?
I am not sure yet, but I think I can make it.
Great.
I'll be there.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I think the more faces, the merrier. And we've, well, there's various other agencies that are working the reentry space who are bringing representatives too, which is great. Again, the information is helpful to the community, to our community members, but it's also helpful to the other agencies around us to get that information and pass it on. So it would be great to have the presence of the board as well. That's it for me. About the Clemency event on the 8th. Does anyone have any questions or before I turn it back over to Indira? Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so wanted to go to our other agenda item, which is really talking about the other outreach efforts that are going on. And so there's been a lot of outreach efforts since our last meeting, which is really great. And I will turn it back over to our staff director to discuss some of those efforts and upcoming events and the events that the board is welcome to join.
Yes. So outreach has been a large push these past 2 months. I've had so many meetings a day with various different agencies and community organizations to let them know about the Clemency Board, that you guys are here, that you're present, that you're accept the applications, what you do. A lot of people don't know, right? You're still very new to the community. And so it's been really great. There's been an overwhelmingly positive response. Everyone's really excited about you all, the presence of the board, which is great. In addition to getting out, outreach or, letting the different various agencies and organizations and schools, because we've met with all of the law schools in the district, letting everyone know that you all are here. We've been finding ways to reach out to incarcerated persons, which is a population that's often ignored and sort of hard to get access to, and returning citizens. And so I want to start by giving a huge shout out to Brian, who was presented on behalf of the Clemency Board for their Community Resource Day. I'm sorry, for CSOSA's Community Resource Day. It was a video conference in December. Shout out to Brian. It was last minute. He jumped in there. He did great. The video conference allowed it. Well, how about this? Let's let Brian talk about what happened at the video conference. Is he on? Oh goodness, he must have been disconnected. Okay. Was trying to give you guys a break from hearing me speak. But so video conference is something that CSOSA does. I believe it's quarterly, and they allow community-based resources and service providers present to incarcerated persons in BOP facilities, specifically to persons with DC code offenses, which is great, right? And let them know about the services that the community offers. And so he was able to speak to incarcerated persons about, with DC code offenses, about the Clemency Board. And so that's great. He jumped in and did it. So shout out to him. I actually attended a record sealing event, a record sealing event that was hosted by Representative Oye, in conjunction with Christian Legal Aid and MORCA and a few other nonprofits. That was also really successful. They, what I've noticed and what I think is right, and I think you all will agree, is that clemency, being such a very narrow area of the law, is best when it's sort of connected or is best spoken about when it's connected with other administrative remedies, particularly because, the applicant potentially has to, or the potential applicant has to exhaust all the other remedies prior to applying for a clemency to be eligible. And so that's sort of the events that I've been targeting, and that event was great. Christian Legal Aid is planning to actually have this event more regularly. The next one is actually this month. And so I'm going to go to that as well, to speak about the Clemency Board, what the application process, and hopefully get more applicants. So that's our end goal. Welcome anybody to come with me. That event is on the 25th of February. It's from 11:30 to 2:30. And there was a great turnout for that. And at that event, I met Time for Change, which is a nonprofit. And they had a sign-up list, a really long sign-up list. I forget the number, but of people who, provided their emails to come, and who came that day, who maybe didn't come that day, but they actually blasted our event invitation to that list. So that's great, because this is exactly the population we want to target. So that's awesome. Just a couple more highlights for outreach. I did a reentry simulation last week, and it was amazing. It was hosted by BOP. They do them regularly for various different agencies. It is a simulation where you, or non-returning citizens, people in the community, particularly agencies and people who are going to be working with returning citizens, go through a simulation where they have to re-enter society. And it really shows you the realities of the barriers that come up from someone who's trying to re-enter society, how difficult it is. I think it was a great training for me, even as a public defender for 7 years. I learned so much, and I think it'll be a great training for the board too. So I am trying to set that up for you all to do it as well. I think it's, again, very informative, and it will be very helpful when you are deliberating and discussing applicants, and when applicants tell you sort of their stories, to have that in mind, the barriers of re-entry society and how that can affect potentially the criminal history you see or their lives.
Did you say that BOP put it on, or was it somebody else doing it on behalf of BOP?
It was the BOP.
Hmm.
Tasha Akins. She has been fabulous, and sadly, she's actually leaving BOP. She actually hosted it, and their BOP spoke at the event, not Tasha, but I guess the head of the reentry section of BOP, and he spoke about wanting to really change the dynamics of reentry in BOP, in understanding so many of the hurdles that sort of incarcerated persons are faced with once they're sort of pushed out of the prison system. And so that, he says, is their goal, and that's what they're trying to do. And he named a few of the different things he's doing to help with that. So it seems like BOP's wanting to head in the right direction, hopefully. Hopefully that's great, and they'll continue to do these simulations. Just one more that's coming up that I welcome any board members to join. DLC, sometime in March. It's been pushed back. I think I spoke about it before, but we're going to go to DLC I'm not sure that it's a tour per se. I'm not interested in a tour of the facility so much as I'm wanting to know the how the jails are set up, their the video conference setups, their abilities to sort of for us to get communications to those within if we need to, right? To understand that layout. I would also love to speak to the residents of DOC while I'm there. And so we're going to be able to do that. We don't have a date yet. It's going to be sometime in March. If anyone is interested in coming, I would love to have a board member there. I think the board member's presence in the community sort of speaks a lot to the commitment. So I'll keep you guys updated on that date. Any questions about any of those? No? Okay. Turning back over to Indira.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And so now I want to see if there's any questions or comments from the public. I didn't see anything in the chat. Okay. Sounds good. And then I guess, is there anything else that anyone else wanted to bring up? Okay. And I guess we are ready to adjourn a little bit early.
Looking forward to meeting some of you in person next Tuesday. I feel like some of you have only met virtually, so it'll be nice to meet in
Yes,
person.
absolutely. 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 Awesome. Well, you get a little bit of your time back this morning, unexpectedly. Thank you all so much. Great seeing you all on screen, and hope to see many of you next week at our first event.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds good.